afternoon and welcome to On One Accord. I'm Jackie El Toro, and my guest today is Rosella White and Reverend Brady Radford. Welcome to the show. They are the founders of. Okay, introduce yourselves, will you?
We're the founders of Generational Care Consulting Group.
Yes, thank you so much for having us on. We're excited about the opportunity to share about this new ministry, new opportunity to serve our community.
Okay, thank you for coming, and just excited to have some younger generation on, and excited about ministry and counseling, positive thinking, attitude, awareness, and I am so looking forward to this. I just met Reverend Brady. He's a graduate from ITC,
Yes.
and a Presbyterian, so not the traditional Baptist, Methodist, or full gospel person. And Ms. White is a good old Lutheran, so we thank you for that. All right. So, Dr. Brady, why don't you start us off?
Well, Generational Care Consulting Group is a ministry that Rosella and I have endeavored to start this year. You know, we've been reflecting for the past 2 years on what we see in the current dynamic of the church, what we see in some of our faith communities, conversations we hear from some of our friends in terms of difficult experiences that they're going through, and needs that they have that are seemingly unmet in some of our traditional ways of doing church. And so our ministry, our hope in creating Generational Care Consulting Group is to partner with faith communities and other nonprofit entities in our communities to train leaders and both clergy and non-clergy leaders to provide compassionate care and leadership development in the community setting.
And Ms. White?
We're just really excited about this opportunity. We really care about people. I mean, if you were to ask either one of us what our primary focus on, it is the care of the individual and the care of the community. And so when we talked about founding this, we really looked at three things, and we talk about healing, growth, and transformation. What does it mean to recognize that one needs healing, that there are pieces and parts of us that are broken? What does it mean to actually grow in our gifts and our abilities? And what does it mean to be transformed? And we know that the Spirit is the one that does the transforming, but how do we then provide a space and opportunity for people to reflect on the things going on in their life? So for us, a big piece of this is caregiving and addressing some issues and topics and things that are stigmas in our community. We find ourselves working most closely with the African American community, but we really want to address some concerns and issues that come up that we don't necessarily get help for, but we'll go to church for.
Okay, and you're generational. Why generational?
Well, we recognize that most of what we see in our communities in the ways of, I'll say, maladaptive behavior. Some people from outside of our communities will call them generational ills. They'll say that, you know, the struggles that we see in our communities, generational poverty, broken families, extreme rates of crime, and low rates of education. Those things, they just don't happen with each generation, each baby that shows up. This baby is a product of those who've come before him or her, and the children of this child will be affected as well. And so when we talk generational, our belief is that when you see one individual, they're the product of the generation that's come before them, and the children that they raise will be affected by the skills that they do or do not have. And so our intentional focus is to provide care in the community and address it on a generational path. And what we mean by generational is at least three lineages, you know, that I sit before you today because of who my father and my mother was. And I know that because of the gifts, skills that they did give me or didn't give me, my children will either grow and progress or suffer as a result of it. And so we don't just want to affect one generation or one person that we're dealing with. We want to help them connect with the story of what's brought them to this point in their life right now, and also help them to move forward by creating transition for the next generation.
Well, some families believe in generational curses, that like alcoholism is a generational curse, and every generation is bound to that. So mental health issues are sometimes also regarded as a generational curse. That's just something in that family. That's part of the family seed. Do you provide counseling for like parents, grandparents, and the child? And what age group are you really aiming for? Because you're both very young adults as far as I'm concerned. Very young adults. In fact, 2 generations in my family. So are you looking at reaching young adults as they're beginning to parent, young parents, and how they can change their attitudes and some of the things that were instilled in them that may be positive and may be negative, and how they're rearing their children now? Or do you want to reach old folk like me and say you've already messed up 2 generations coming behind you?
Well, I'm a pastor of counseling in the Presbyterian Church, and so throughout the Presbyterian Greater Atlanta, I have an opportunity to work with individuals, couples, and families. Primarily, my work has been with young adults in the same age demographic as myself. That's ranging from 18 to 35 or 40. But in reality, we would love to work with more seasoned adults, so into the 60s and 70s, because while we recognize many of those people may be quote unquote set in their ways, that season of life is about giving back. It's about, even if the grandparents didn't make some of the best decisions, they don't want the same thing for their babies and their grandbabies. And so really connecting the generational energy, power, force for transformation is what we hope to do. I'm aware of one thing. When it comes down to relationships, marriages in our communities, rarely if ever do young adults hear honest conversation from their parents about what happened in their marriage or what's happening in their marriage. And so if I can't hear it from mama and daddy or grandma and granddaddy, where am I going to hear it from?
Well, that opens up a whole nother line of conversation as to how many of these young adults have actually experienced healthy marriages in their lives.
Right. And we're taking for granted that we're dealing with young adults who've grown up in 2-parent homes. And reality suggests that that's not the case.
Okay. And sometimes you have generations that have grown up as single parents. I know when my daughter was small, some of her friends were like, "You're the only person I know that has a 2-parent home. They live with your biological," well, they didn't say biological, but you live with your real daddy. And I was like, "Really? You're the only one?" Because it was just not the social norm that kids would grow up in a family where the 2 parents were married, and I don't know, fortunately or unfortunately, my kids have grown up in a 2-parent home. My husband and I celebrated 40 years this year.
Wow. Congratulations.
A long time being married. I told you I was old. A long time of being married. So when you encounter young adults, do you ask them to bring in their parents?
Not immediately. Oftentimes when I encounter young adults, we're dealing with practical daily issues of their relationship. And so that could be anything from finances to just downright personality conflicts. And so the primary work is meeting the immediate need, responding to the immediate need, but then also helping them to go back and discover, I just didn't show up with these ways of thinking, these ways of imaging women or imagining what the male responsibility or posture is supposed to be in marriage or in relationships. Where did I learn it from? And as I reflect on where I learned it from, now I can ask myself if it serves me well or not. If it does serve me well, then I can continue moving forward, building upon it. But if not, it may be a generational thing that I might want to rewrite.
And I think what's key about this is that it begins with self-awareness, so nurturing a space and environment where people can reflect and become aware of these things that Brady is talking about. So aware of how my attitudes were formed, aware of how I view the world and I view relationships. And I don't think that we give ourselves enough time to not just sit and think about things, 'cause I think we overthink sometimes, but to actually reflect and to say, this is something that I've experienced, this is a relationship that I've been a part of, and these are themes that keep occurring, or these are things that keep happening. So why is that, and where does that come from? And I think part of our hope is to provide a space to allow people to do that, so that they're able to say, as Brady said, do I want to continue this way, or do I want to choose another path? So I don't think our goal is to necessarily tell people, well, you need to go back to your parents and tell them X, Y, and Z, and that this happened, and no, like our goal is to really work with an individual and help them come into their own, take account of their life and to make decisions. And we believe that can start as young as middle schoolers and high schoolers. My background is youth and family ministry, and one of the things that I do when I work with young people is to say, you have the capacity to think and to create. And so I want to encourage you to do that and to take the time to reflect on your decisions and take the time to reflect on what you're being told, and not in a standpoint to buck the system, so to speak, but to really think about what is it that you want to do for you and what are the decisions you should be making for you. So part of our hope is, again, to provide a space for that and a place that normally that's not necessarily valued in that way. We're not necessarily from a culture that values talking and contemplation and reflecting and taking time. And we really, both of us, I think, have benefited from those practices and really want others to experience that.
How many of our youth do you think suffer from depression?
Well, our youth in terms of African American youth?
African American youth. Youth of color.
Youth of color, it's a lot, but part of our problem is that we don't ask for help. We don't reach out. We don't say that. So there's a statistic from Mental Health America that says 63% of African Americans view depression as a personal weakness. They don't even view it as a mental illness. So we don't even view depression or other mental illnesses like we view diabetes, like we view heart disease, like we view high blood pressure. We view it as a personal weakness. So it's hard to even say or, quantify how many young people suffer with it, because we don't even allow them the space to say, I have this or I feel this way. So part of our hope, again, is to provide space for people to be able to take a step back and say, this is what I'm feeling, this is what I'm going through. And because of our training, because of our background, then we can say, well, this is now what you can do to help change that and help impact that.
Well, when we talk about the other diseases, heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, depression can cause all of those.
Absolutely.
And it's sometimes depression is the underlying factor because of diabetes or high blood pressure or heart disease. There's a mental health component. And typically our community really doesn't talk about mental health at all. We had conversations on this show and on this platform about HIV and how the church kind of ignores HIV. We don't talk about that. And the other thing we don't talk about is mental health, and not just mental health in young adults. The conversation and the debate is beginning now on a national level since the horrific events in Connecticut. But, are we going to talk about that in our community, because that conversation is really not delving with our community. We have so many young people who are killing each other on a daily basis. You look at any statistic from Chicago.
Yes.
Pick any day of the week in Chicago, and you have a number of murders, or Philadelphia, or New York, or Seattle has just gone through a major killing spree among our folk. Where do we begin to do that? How do we get my age to admit that we have depression? We baby boomers, we're not happy. Are we dealing the fact that we are now, in our 50s, mid 50s, late 50s, early 60s, and we don't have the retirement plan that we thought we would have. Many of us lost thousands, hundreds of thousands of dollars in the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
And that was our golden nest egg. Yeah, you know, so we feel down, disappointed in ourselves. We go through things, but do we label it and call it depression? And then what do we do? And how do we respond to those around us? All right, y'all are professionals. Let's start this conversation.
That's a lot. That's a lot to chew on at one time. But I think I like to approach it from the stance of looking at our historical patterns. Where are the places that we have gone we've needed help? Because this will build a solid bridge for the work that we hope to do. The church has been our institution. Church has been the institution that we've depended on when financial hard times came, when difficulties in families came, when the loss of loved ones emerged in our families. The faith community was a place that we looked to. Well, what we're dealing with now is that faith communities are finding themselves in a quagmire, if you will. How do we care for all these people? We're hurting so much. When we got a pastor who might have gone to seminary to get some training, he or she may have, but they can't do it all by themselves. And we got some lay leaders here in this community, but they're not trained to do it all by themselves. And some of them are hurting as well. Clergy depression, clergy suicide is a real phenomenon in our communities. We need to pay attention to that as well. So what we're looking at is that if you follow the pattern, that in our communities when people have been hurting, they've turned to the church. That's why our hope is to begin by building partnerships with faith communities to begin to pragmatically, very practically, grassroots level, partner with these organizations, train lay leaders in the skills of compassionate care, compassionate listening. Sometimes there's a sacred moment that happens when we're able to meet each other in our areas of deepest need. There's so many needs out there that if we focus too much on the problem, we can easily get overwhelmed. And you say, well, this is just one little church. What are we going to do in this community of thousands of people? But as our societies increasingly become more rapidly moving, become less personal, and more individualistic, more instant gratification, people are losing the sense of personal connection and touch. And that is a vital resource for providing compassionate care. So when we talk about generational care and wellness, generational care and consulting, we're talking about a wellness model that helps communities begin to care for themselves. Henry Nouwen, wonderful Catholic father, who writes a book called The Wounded Healers. And what the book reminds us of is that we all have a place of our own, sense of our own woundedness, but once we're able to come together and heal and find our own healing, we can then be used of the Spirit to provide healing in the community, even as wounded healers. And so, Rosella, I'll give you the opportunity to pick up from there.
Well, and I think, thinking about where does this start, right? So we're talking about a partnership with the place where we have traditionally gone when we have been in times of crisis. But also, it begins with education, right? It begins with helping people to understand what does it mean to say that one has depression? Because I think that sometimes that is equated with, well, I'm just sad, right? So we talk about educating people that there's a difference between having a depressed mood, there's a difference between being sad, there's a difference between grieving because of things that are going on in your life that would cause anyone, to feel that sadness. So part of our role also is to help educate and to say, depression looks like this. It looks like exhibiting certain things for X amount of period of time, right? It looks like not being able to have the motivation to work, to get out of bed, to be able to do the things that you would normally be able to do. It's different from sadness. It's actually something that impairs your day-to-day functioning. And so part of the education piece also has to be connected to storytelling and sharing. And so for me, a big piece of this has been sharing my own story and struggle with depression, and having struggled with depression from the time I was 12, 13, 14, and not being diagnosed until I was 25, and that being something that I struggled with throughout my life, and looking back, seeing times when I lost basically all hope and all will to do anything, and it was depression. It was not just sadness. And now, because I have taken the step to understand what it is, to seek treatment for it, and to have things from medication, support groups, friends, family, all of these things, that then helps me tell my story, but then other people can say, that's what I've experienced, or I think I know someone who's experienced that as well. So I think, along with this notion of educating and connecting with these communities where we have traditionally gone to get help, we have to help people share their stories and recognize their stories. And it may not be depression, it may be something else. I mean, we're talking about mental health as the taboo. There's, I think, as Brady said, and I think, Jackie, as you have said, so many issues and things that we consider to be taboo that we don't talk about. But again, we have to provide the space to do that. And so part of our call, and I think where our gifts lies in that place of helping people just sit and provide the space to help them reflect on what they're going through. I know that Brady has worked significantly with young adults and young couples. I find myself working both with youth and families, but also with women, adult women of all ages. And just providing them, again, I can't say it enough, the space to sit and reflect and to listen to them and reflect back what they're saying has been a huge gift, not just for them, but for me, because the generational theme comes rolling out, right? So I'm sitting with people who are my mother's age, who are my grandparents' age, and we're having conversations, and I'm listening and they're listening, and it becomes this sacred moment where they're sharing, and there's a point of understanding and connection that we normally don't have the time to even do because we're not listening to one another. We're just kind of walking past. So, again, our goal is to facilitate those types of moments and conversations so that we can change the course of our future and change the way that people view themselves and view whatever issues or illnesses they may be fighting for the better.
We talk about what I think going through my mind when you were speaking is relationships. First of all, you have to have a relationship with someone, whether it's a personal relationship or a private relationship, professional or whatever, that is close enough to you to say, there's something wrong. Okay, maybe you need to look at this. And that person may say, well, maybe you need to start finding you're happy. Excuse me. Or just noticing your behavior and caring enough to step up. I had a conversation with one of my relatives, one of my cousins, and it was about our family and who in our immediate family or extended family could potentially benefit from some mental health counseling. And, is the family strong enough or brave enough to say, you're on a slope. Can we get you off that before it gets slippery? And, or do you have a friend who is looking at your behavior and saying that your behavior has gone from here to here, and this shouldn't bother you as much as it is? Let's talk about that. And I'm looking at our producer here, who is like, perhaps we're not getting picked up enough on a mic, but she's. Anyway, I get chided a lot on this show. And I think about churches. We're gone to mega churches, which have lost that personal relationship. People could use to, girl,
not
honey,
in all cases, though.
Yeah, honey, you don't look quite well today. We used to call it getting in our business. When you're in a small church environment and people like, you look sad for a couple of weeks now. What's going on with you? A mega church, you don't get that. Then people, I don't have to go to church. I watch it on TV, or I'm streaming live. I watch it on the
individualism.
And I don't have to do that. I follow a ministry on Twitter, or I follow this pastor on Twitter, or they're my Facebook friend, and they're losing interpersonal relationships and becoming deeper and deeper into themselves and perhaps unhealthy
and isolated. I mean, if I can throw out like kind of the Martin Luther, when we talk about what does it mean to be sinful, it's turning in on oneself, right? So curved in on oneself is what Luther talked about when he talked about sin and brokenness. And I say that from the standpoint of we're becoming so isolated that the community suffers, that our families suffer, that we suffer as individuals because we're not in these relationships. And I don't know if it's our fear of being vulnerable, if it's our, mistrust, because there have been things that have legitimately happened that have caused us to question the closeness that we find ourselves in. But I think part of what Generational Care and Consulting Group wants to do is to lift up this incarnational way of being, right? We're people of Christian faith, and we believe in a God that came to be with us, that walked with us. And so we hope to walk with others as they are dealing with their issues and as they're dealing with the things that are happening in their lives, and to be fully present.
So do you do youth retreats or young couples retreats?
We will.
Okay, so any church that is out there listening, email them.
Yes.
Go to their website, contact Rosella or Brady, and they will be more than happy to come out to your church. We do shameless plugs here. That's what we're about.
Love to do workshops. We love to do seminars. Love to have an opportunity to preach on a mental health center. It'd be a great opportunity for a congregation to really open themselves up to hearing. What does God say about not only our spiritual wellness, but also our mental, emotional wellness? Because, spiritual maturity can't happen on an island. Spiritual maturity is holistic, and it's also a part of our physical well-being, our mental well-being, our emotional well-being. God's not just the God of the phenomenon, the mysterium, the spirit that we think is sometimes above and away from us. But God's the God of all of this. Over my full life, at least I want God's hand over my full life. My mental well-being, my emotional well-being, and my physical well-being, and all the other well-beings that are out there as well. I wholeheartedly believe that we're missing that component. How many times do we have to see that brother so-and-so and sister so-and-so, they used to sit together right here on this pew. They were married. They had 2 kids. And now one of them had to leave the church because they're no longer married. Or one of them sits over there because they're no longer married. And we see it happen over and over again in our communities. But we don't say anything because we don't know what to say. We don't have any response because we don't know what to say. But the reality is that the divorce rate is almost 50% for first marriages, 60% for second marriages, and almost 70% for third marriages. That's not happening out there. That's happening in our communities. That's happening in our pews. And what that means is that when we have, churches are made up of families. And when families are broken, then there are certain parts of our communities that are disconnected. And I believe that we can respond to that as a faith community, as the body of Christ.
And we can provide an alternative response, because I think for so many people, I think what also happens in our communities is that people start to feel shame when they do go through these things that have historically been either taboo or, so where historically I may come to church. Now it's like, well, I may come, but I may not be sharing, or people may know because it's something that's being talked about, but I really don't want to talk about it, and the church doesn't talk about it, so we all just go around not talking about it, when the reality is that we can provide this voice of care, of compassion, of concern, and this is me personally speaking, of not judgment of people going through this, because we know that so many people experience so many different things in trauma and crisis. And so how do we help you as a congregation and community really care for those that are going through these difficult situations, even as you're nurturing the next generation to maybe make different choices, or to maybe make choices that would lead them down different paths? How can we hold both of those and honor both of the stories and the people as they're going through these situations? I think that's really important.
Okay, so you spoke very eloquently. I attended a workshop of yours at our women's convention. The only problem with it was that it was way too short. And I didn't stay around and talk to you afterwards because I had my own workshop to do. And how do you construct your workshops? And it's going to be two parts, okay? First, Rosella on how she speaks to young women, or in that case, you were the youngest woman in the room. I think, no, Robin was the youngest woman in the room, but it was, we definitely, I was even one of the younger people in the room. Yeah. And then Brady, how would you construct for young men, young adult men, the 18 to 30 group, or even maybe a 16 to 25-year-old group of men, and you, a 16 to 25, and this is a shameless plug, so that folk who are out there watching, they are willing to travel.
Yes.
Okay. I know where my base is, and we have quite a large population of folks in the Philadelphia area watching, and some in the Baltimore, Maryland area. So, I do shameless plugs, and definitely would like to see this growing. How would you frame, and I know this is like really on the spot because we did not talk about this, and we're going to get to the list of things that you have to talk about. And we have totally ignored.
This is good.
Okay, so Rosella, let's go.
Well, depending on what topic the workshop is, so
it's your workshop.
Okay.
So let's just frame it how you would like to do it.
So if I'm working with young adult women per se, and actually this would be a model that I use no matter what age group, because I think it works well. There's a time and space of just sharing, right? Of having people share what their experience has been, related to whatever the topic is. So if we're talking about relationships, what has your experience been in relationship? What are some of the founding relationships that helped you think about how to be in a relationship? What are the messages you get about relationships? I'm one who really likes to engage people in conversation, because I feel like I can come in with a plan, but until I know the people who are in the room and until I know what their experiences are, then only can I start to connect with them and relate whatever the material is to what their experience is, right? So having time to hear back from folks and share their stories, and then part of my role as a workshop facilitator is connecting that to our larger story as people of faith, and as people that are on this journey together, right? So what does Scripture say about that? What does our tradition say about this? What are some voices that we can pull from our past that speak to where we find ourselves? And then for me, the next part is moving people into this. Okay, we've talked about where we are. We've talked about where we've come from. Now, where do we want to go? Like, what are those things that we see that we want to be different in our life? And this, again, speaks to the generational component of things. How do I go from point A to point B, taking all of this into account, not cutting out pieces of my journey, but taking into account my whole journey so that I'm able to live abundantly? And then what does that mean for me? What does abundant life look like? So I must say that many of the workshops I lead tend to leave participants with more questions than answers, but again, it's to get them to start thinking and to empower them to make choices for their life, where they are able to trust themselves, their guts, where they're connected to the identity that God has gifted them with, where they're connected to the goodness that God has found in them. Because again, so many messages tell us that we're not good, that we can't be good, that we have to work to be all of these things, and we never get to rest in the fact that God created and said it was good. So my goal in any workshop I lead is to help people get to that place so that they can envision and imagine a life for themselves.
Okay.
So if we're talking men, 16 to 25, I think, again, it could be a number of different titles or themes for the workshop, but I think one of the dominant themes for that age demographic, are positive masculine images, and so I could come up with a title for that. Let's just say caring for God's gem, G-I-M, caring for the God in me, beyond the bling bling culture. That's tying together a few things I've done work with in the past. But I think we'd have to begin with what are the dominant images for masculinity that we see in our culture, and how does that how is that serving us in our particular community? So we're talking age group of 16 to 25 African American males. I think about a particular kind of culture that they're being bombarded with on a daily basis. I think the work that we hope to do would first seek to lead them to ask some very critical questions about, what power do I have in shaping the context that I find myself in. And so when it comes down to these images of masculinity that are misogynistic or perpetuate violence, perpetuate stereotypical ways of being, which is the stereotypical way of being as a African American male in that age demographic, is that there's this physical prowess about you, and that generally you lead more with your physical capabilities than your mental or emotional capabilities. And so I think the work would be tapping into some of those undervalued regions of our own humanity, of our own self, of our own selves when we're talking about what's portrayed in dominant culture, and really by getting them to tap into those things, claiming a value in, as a African American male, the images that you've seen in terms of relationships, be it with the father, if you've seen males in your lives, be it with the barber, the preacher, the bus driver, the janitor at the school. Where can we find good images, positive things that you have seen? Take those images and then build upon those images, as well as provide some education about everything from emotional skills building emotional vocabulary, so that it's possible for me to, as a 16 to 25-year-old man, tell you how I feel and not get the sense that I'm weak or I'm punking out in some kind of way because I've claimed an emotion that's something other than me being angry or me being ready to turn up and go loud and get hype, which are all the dominant images that we see in the media, but those images are rarely balanced by positive images, and maybe there's a better word than positive. Those images are rarely balanced by healthy images. We see a lot of maladaptive behavior, and earlier we were talking about that. I think statistics have said that the age demographic 16 to 25 is one of endangered species for African American males. And so the brothers that we're looking at in that demographic, they're survivors. They found a way to make it. But one thing about surviving is that we learn how to adapt, but those can be maladaptive behaviors. Those can be adaptations, but they can be adaptations that are not serving us well. And so we need food in the house. I may have had to kind of hit the block and do what I need to do to make sure Mama got money to get milk and bread. That's adapting to your current context. But is it serving you well? Is it a plan for the future? Does it have longevity attached to it? And if it doesn't, what kind of resources can we talk about connecting these young brothers to, so that there's a different possibility? And so I think it's long and wide, but I think that's the stable response.
Well, if you were watching, you noticed we have ran over half an hour. So, but the conversation is such that we feel and the station feels that we need to keep it going. So we're going to run for an hour. All right, and we're just going to keep the conversation going. So, without a break. And how can I help you? What can we do as a community besides opening some doors in some churches and some other community organizations? Are you partnering with anyone currently? Who are you working with, or are we just new on the block and looking? Well, in the season of Advent, it's full of expectations.
There you go.
Definitely full of expectations. That's without a doubt. But of course, you can continue to help us by praying. Praying for continued strength and direction and vision as we move forward. Some of the community partners that we're working with currently. I'm a minister of First African Presbyterian Church. We are continuing to build relationships with with my church, and are currently working on a contract now to provide care and compassion training to the lay leaders, the deacons and elders at the church, so that they'll be able to provide care for members in the community who are going through grief issues, that they'll be able to have some training that will give them the capacity to see some of the alert signs for mental health issues, depression, some awareness for personality disorders, things of that nature, and then also just regular pastoral care issues, in terms of food, clothing, lights, bills, that kind of thing. So we're looking to build partnerships with churches in those kind of ways. We also have done some work out in College Park with New Life Presbyterian Church, helping them by providing some grief seminars for a number of families over the course of the years of lost loved ones. She did a workshop on grief and shared with them in terms of the stages of grief. One of the experiences that I had in leading that workshop was I had a 60-year-old African American male to come to me and said, "Brother, I'm so thankful that you told me that being angry is part of grieving, because before now I couldn't give myself permission to be angry about not being there when my best friend died. And so I've been angry at the doctors, I've been angry at myself, I've been angry with God to some degree, and I hadn't had any place to put that, and so I've been holding all that in. But as you shared and talked about the stages of grief, denial, anger, bargaining, depression, acceptance, that gave me a new way of seeing my experience and interpreting my experience and recognizing that this is part of the process. I don't just have to hold this in, because if I tell somebody at the church that I'm angry, that might not go over so well. So those are the kind of experiences that we're looking to multiply, because we believe that when people have those kinds of experiences, they really are growing. They really are finding the healing that they need. And ultimately that growth, that healing will lead to the transformation that we hope and pray for our communities.
We've done work with individuals and families as well. So, like we've talked about, part of our hope is partnering with faith communities, because we really do believe that is the fertile ground, and that is the place where not only we can come alongside the work that so many pastors are already doing, but also where we can help build up others that can provide the care. But also with individuals, right? So whether it be young adults and coaching them, whether it be couples, whether it be families. I've done a lot of work with young people in crisis, and helping them to not just make sense of that, but how they make decisions in the future, and how they understand, again, who they are and whose they are. Because I believe that so many people, particularly young people when they're struggling, it comes from a place of not being clear in their identity. And not that we're ever fully clear in our identity, or I expect someone who's 16 to know who they are. But I do believe that we can provide and have provided space for people to really wrestle with some of that. So they're able to say, this is what I stand for, and this is what I believe today. And because of those things, I'm going to make these decisions. So working with individuals, working with young adults in those ways. And really, if I had to say what I wanted, it would be for communities of faith to just be open to the conversations. We're not asking, we just want people to be open, right? To say that, you know what, I may need some help, and we may have some issues, or people in our congregation may be dealing with some things, and we'd love to just have a conversation with you. That's all we probably would want at the beginning, is just a conversation. And to be open to the fact that there are things that we have long just not talked about, we have put off, we have not really been open to, that people are struggling with. And it's time for us to say something and do something about it, and to do something in a way that is caring and compassionate, and ultimately helps people make sense of their lives and their situations, versus alienating them because they are experiencing these things.
Well, I know at my congregation, Emmanuel Lutheran Church, another shameless plug, but we have a rash of deaths and illness. We have an older population. The congregation is getting much older, and a lot of illness. So one of our parishioners formed a caregivers meeting or support group. And so we meet once a month as caregivers and talk about the challenges of giving care to a person who is chronically ill or terminally ill.
Very thankless work, but very hard work.
And you know, oftentimes the caregiver goes before the person they're caring for, and just trying to keep each other's mental health up, you know, our spirits up and elevated, and to provide some kind of respite for one another. I don't know how many other churches, you know, in our Lutheran spectrum is doing that. You know, so maybe that's something we need to start pushing. And now that I know that you're available to do that, we will start promoting that.
And that's actually some of the work that I do now. I work as a chaplain with Emory Center for Pastoral Services, but as in my role in the work that I do is working with families who are grieving an older population and people who are dying and who are making decisions about end of life, and working with caregivers and supporting them. I mean, that is something that I think is hugely important, and we know the amount of people that are caring for loved ones that are aging, and we also know that we don't necessarily talk about death and dying in ways before it happens that helps us to have, I don't want to say positive experiences, but that helps us to grieve in healthy ways and helps us to talk about it and not be afraid of the inevitable in many ways. And so how do we do that and provide support around that in ways that's healthy and faithful and life-giving ultimately?
I think I'd like to take the step of having a positive experience with death, because you know I think that we operate from a deficit model in our culture. And so mental health is simply not the absence of illness. Mental health is its own type of progressive trajectory that involves a sense of well-being that's increasingly perpetual, that it's growing, that it's increasing in capacity and size. So when I talk about mental and spiritual health, I'm not just saying that we're not currently going through any spiritual troubles or we're not currently going through any mental troubles, but know that we're experiencing the fullness of the life that God's called us to, that Jesus came that we could live, and not just live, but live abundantly. I think that's the kind of life that I'm really hoping we can turn people on to. I mean, for so long we've helped people define themselves by what they don't do when it comes to our faith formation, our spiritual relationships. But what about helping you to define your faith identity, your spiritual health, in terms of the things that you do, not the things that you don't do, but you know, I can tell you this is who I am because I do these things to back it up. You know, this is a part of my spiritual health. This is a part of my mental health. And so when we talk about a positive experience with dying, you know, death is a part of life, and a very sacred part of life, to really be honest. And so at First African, we talk about the transition, moving from time to eternity, and really helping people to, you know, imagine that, you know, in many cases, as our loved ones are living longer lives these days, with the increase of medicine and different things of that nature, you know, hopefully we can begin to create some generational paths that are positive, perpetual cycles of well-being, that a little baby boy can look up to his grandfather or grandmother and not see him or her having to take 12 or 15 pills every morning, but to say, you know, when I get to be 60, I want to be playing volleyball and baseball and running and jumping like my granddaddy and my grandma. You know, that kind of thing. And I don't think that's pie in the sky. I think that's possible if we really get down to having some rudimentary core conversations about our current ways of being, the current generational path that we're on, and the power that we have right now to change that. I think that's ultimately in order for this time that we're living in right now.
Awesome. I think the whole connecting, the holistic approach, where everything is connected to the spirit. And I know in my personal life, I lost some really important people to me this year. And I'll be so happy when 2013 comes in. I lost really, really important people to me. You know, people that I dearly loved and cared about, and surprisingly not anticipated deaths, where we had a time to prepare and mourn and anticipate. And then you look at I found out about a death just this week. And remembering the last conversation we had and how that conversation ended, and there is some guilt, depression, or anxiety, if you will, associated with that. And having the courage to realize that there is some anxiety associated with that, and just okay, how you gonna deal with this? You have to deal with it. And I had some conversations with the person's sister, and that was a place of someone that I didn't have to explain a whole lot of history to, but we could talk, and we just shared. Again, that results in having relationships. And oftentimes we don't have that safe relationship with people, and then we don't have God.
Yes.
And while it's important to have relationships with people, it's also important to have a relationship with God. I just got the signal that we need to be wrapping up a little bit here.
Oh, already?
Yeah, man. It's been like we're looking at an hour, so I don't want the last thing to be. Well, it will be my voice, but I thank you all so very much, Rosella White and Reverend Brady Radford, and I'm just, so thrilled for you guys to come and share, especially this holiday season. We've got like 4 minutes, so I'm going to divide it up equally, 2 minutes apiece. Rosella, give me 2 minutes of what you would like to tell people who are going through something for the Christmas holidays or the holiday season. And Pastor Brady, give us a message of hope, and go before Linda tells me we got 3 minutes.
My message is basically always the same. I want people to know that they are not alone. I know it feels like you're alone, and I know it feels like the dark will never end, and I know it feels like there is no light at the end of the tunnel. But for me, the biggest thing is just letting people know that they are not alone, that there are people that care, people that want to walk alongside you, people that want to help you. And if anything else, just email me. I say that, but that's you're not alone.
Just email you.
Yes.
It's that simple.
Yes.
Or follow her blog.
Oh, follow my blog. I write at embracingmyshadow.com, and I write about depression. And it's been a huge blessing for me, and I think a blessing for others to realize
Repeat
that
that
they're
again
not
so
alone.
Linda can get it.
It's embracingmyshadow.com.
Okay.
Yeah. And I just want to say, as being someone who's been in a relationship with Rosella, and we've supported one another back and forth, that experience of her writing this blog has been healing for her as well. It's been a gift, but it's also been one of those steps that God has given in her walking into her own healing. So as we close, and just think about the theme of growth, healing, transformation. Growth, healing, transformation. That in this season, this may be a season of transformation. This may be a difficult season where there are some dark moments, where there are some dark times. But as Rosella's already shared, you're not alone. You're not alone. I need you to hear that message really clearly. You're not alone. If for no other reason, remember the scripture that reminds us that the one who watches Israel does not sleep nor slumber. You are not alone, and that it's my belief that God is giving us an opportunity to rewrite the story that we've read for so long in terms of ways of being the faith community that overlooks very apparent issues. And so help is on the way. Help is on the way. And follow the blog, email us, visit our website. We certainly want to reach out. We want to hear your story. We want to witness that story, reflect back to you what God gives us to share. It's my prayer that in this season you would remember that you're not alone and that there's help available. Reach out.
All right. Well, thank you. And don't forget, embracingmyshadow.com. Yes. Follow her on her blog. Thank you, Rosella White, Reverend Brady Radford. It has been such a thrill and a joy and a blessing for you guys to come and give us hope during this Christmas season. And as always, I'm Jackie El Toro. Thank you for being on one accord.